Hi guys, welcome to this Varsword tutorial. I'm Dingles, a speedrunner of Megaman Battle Network 3, and I'm going to show you how to understand and improve your use of Varsword in BN3. I'm making this video because, although the input commands are out there on the internet, a lot of the nuance to actually unlocking this chip's full potential is relying on explanations from top runners, and I thought that maybe a more detailed approach with visuals may help. Varsword is possibly the most powerful standard chip in the entire series, and an essential tool for speedrunners. The first time I used this chip, and I'm probably not alone here, I thought it was just a sword with a bit more damage that for some reason had some slight lag. But as we've seen throughout this series, there are codes hidden throughout the game, as well as via shared knowledge through experimentation of the player base, and these codes change how the chip performs. These are the codes, and then I'll explain how the chip works. Wide sword. Hold A, then press up, right, down. Long sword. Hold A, press down, down, right, right. Hero sword. Hold A, press left, left, down, 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 right, right. Life sword. Hold A, press down, left, up, right, down. Sonic boom. Left, B, right, B. Sonic boom is also known as tri-slash. Elemental sonic boom. Hold A, press B, B, left, down, up. Elemental sonic boom is also known as E/slash. I'll refer to their shorter names from here on out. The Rockman EXE Zone has a comprehensive list of commands for the series. It's your one-stop shop for information related to Megaman Battle Network. I've left a link to their command codes below, as there are websites out there that still to this day have the incorrect directions for E/slash. So the first four commands essentially just change the shape to other swords you've probably used in the game. Pulling off the wide sword combo will obviously then hit 3 panels, those being the panel in front of Mega Man and the panels above and below. Long sword will perform like this. Hero sword will perform like this. And life sword will perform like this. Okay, so the first 4 commands are pretty straightforward. You're basically just rotating your thumbstick or D-pad in one direction or the other. So for instance, wide sword starts with up and then rotates to right. You can do that like that. So like that. Longsword is basically the same thing, but starting with down, we just another quarter circle to right, like that. Hero sword is a half circle, starting with left and finishing at right, like that. And then life sword starts with down and actually does a full circle all the way around, like that. Pretty straightforward. The last 2 commands are a bit different though, and because of this, they're harder to input. But before that, let me explain why we consider this chip to be so strong. Tri-slash will send 3 waves of damage out, similar to how Proto Man attacks if you've played these games before. Each wave is 3 panels wide and deals 160 damage to the first thing hit. It's incredibly useful throughout the speedrun and as a casual player. This attack will most likely end any virus fight or leave them barely hanging on. E/slash is where things get crazy though. It sends out 4 waves of damage, each with their own element: fire, aqua, electric, and wood. To add to that, the most insane thing about the chip is that only the last wave causes invincibility frames on a boss. So if you land this attack, even against a neutral element boss, you're going to deal 640 damage. If they have an element, that's 800 you're going to deal. And if you have a panel underneath them, like grass or ice, you can deal 960 damage in one attack. Honestly, if you can master this move, the entire game becomes easier. And if you're a runner or looking at becoming a runner, the speedrun then turns into just draw Varsword as the goal. Some of you might be able to just look at those input commands and be able to do this. Others might pull it off every now and again, maybe inconsistently, but not understand where you're going wrong sometimes, while some work, while some don't. Sorry, I know that's a lot to hit you with, so now I'm going to teach you how to do these moves, starting with the common pitfalls of Elemental Sonic Boom, so we can figure out where you're going wrong. You do have to hold A throughout the entire input. Letting go early just fires the Varsword as a standard sword shape. Individual inputs. One of the key factors that the game doesn't really explain well is that each of the command inputs has to be counted as individual. What this means is that you can't have any bleeding of inputs into one another. With the E/code in particular, it's more than likely going to be your transition from inputting the second B and starting to input the left. Because we have to input the code fairly quickly, the B press can sometimes bleed into the left press and become B plus left, which doesn't perform Elemental Sonic Boom. One of the hard things about Varsword is that it's sometimes hard to tell where you're going wrong, but this is most likely what it will look like visually if you're bleeding your inputs together. Okay, so this is probably what it's going to look like if you're overlapping your B into your left and hitting B plus left. Okay, so in a moment I'm going to use this controller display to show you an overlapping input resulting in a sword. Then the correct input. Now I'm looping them for you slowly side by side. And finally I've frozen this frame here to show you that indeed there's an input overlap where B and left are together, resulting in the basic sword shape. Speed versus rushing. Go fast, but do not rush. Because the frame window for inputs when performing Varsword is 45, we don't really have much time to play around with. This can sometimes result in rushing inputs, which can obviously then lead to either entering an incorrect input or, as I just mentioned previously, an input not being counted as individual. Once you start holding A, you have 45 frames, which is 0.75 of a second, to enter a valid button combo. This is more time than it seems at first. While speed is important, rushing often leads to overlapping inputs, which is the hardest mistake to fix. Experiment with going slow. Focus on the motions, the order, and the buttons. Speed will come with practice. The only real way to counter this effect is solid practice. I'll mention towards the end of the video a really great practice method. As you become more proficient in inputting the code, then you know the window and you'll rush less, focusing on correct input over the stress of not getting it out in time. Starting before begin fight. This tip is probably aimed more in line with a speedrunner's use of the chip, as when we're running, we want to see that chip in our first draw, select OK and perform it as soon as possible, because it can finish the fight instantly. One thing to remember though is that there's a small window after hitting OK when no inputs are counted. Because of this, if we start inputting early and it misses the first input, usually your A button, then obviously we may not be entering the code, or we may be entering it partially. This is what it can look like if you start before the begin fight. Okay, so this is what it can look like if I start entering the code early and the game eats my inputs. One of the best ways to counter this, and a lot of runners do this consciously and subconsciously, is to have a buffer chip before the Varsword that we can spam so we know we've resumed control of Megaman. Usually it's our regged star code chip like Invis. Another good method is to just hold a direction, and when Megaman moves to that direction, we can start inputting the code. Okay, so this is a good method of counteracting an early code input. I'll grab the regged Invis chip. The reason why we select this chip as well is because if there is an enemy Navi or virus that can knock us out of performing the code, the Invis keeps us safe by allowing it not to hit us basically. So I'll grab Invis and I will press my A button first to make sure that I've got control of Megaman, and then I know I can start inputting the code. And then to show you another method, let's just say for some reason I didn't have Invis on reg. Another good method is to just basically move Megaman a direction, and when I know he's moved, I know I've got control, so I can just throw the code out then as well. There you go. Grip. Controller versus console versus keyboard. Because the input of Varsword requires fast inputs as both buttons and directions, it can be far too slow to perform in a normal grip style. A lot of runners will change their grip style when using the chip. This really can just be a preference thing, but here's how I perform the Varsword using some various controllers or consoles. Okay, so this is actually the GBA cart running on a DS. And this is how my hands would be set up, like this if I was just running around. But if I get an encounter with Varsword, like this, I'm actually going to roll my hand over. And then I'm going to use my middle finger to hold down the A button, and then my index finger to double tap my B inputs. So it should look a little something like this. There you go. Okay, so same setup here, but I've actually hooked up the Switch Pro controller. Just to show you guys how a lot of the runners use controller, so it's probably a good thing to see. So same thing, roll the hand over and then input that code. So I'm actually a keyboard runner, so I've got the camera set up so I can show you what it's like on keyboard. I find it to be one of the easier methods to pull off the Varsword. It's quite quick. Yeah, there you go. Just consider what's comfortable for you. If you change your grip style and notice that you're getting Varsword out more often, then do it. Rolling inputs. A controller does seem to be easier, in my opinion, to perform the wide sword, long sword, hero and life sword inputs. However, one of the issues that arise when performing E/, specifically on controllers, is rolling your inputs. What can happen is when you do your left down up, especially if you're rotating or rolling either your thumbstick or D-pad, if you slightly overshoot, what you're actually inputting can be too similar to the hero sword input. The game can interpret it as such and actually perform it. It's not always consistent because it's based on how much you're overshooting your roll. Here's what it may look like to help you diagnose. Okay, so here's what it looks like if you accidentally roll your thumbstick or D-pad too far when doing the left down portion of Varsword. The game can actually interpret it as the full half circle, and therefore it will pull off the hero sword combo. It can actually even sometimes pull off the long side portion, which is just your down to your down right. There you go. So even though I inputted the double B and the left, because I followed through too far with my left, it inputted it as Varsword, as the fighter sword, not Varsword. Okay, so to show you visually where you're going wrong when you're rolling your thumbstick or your D-pad and getting either a fighter sword or a long sword off instead of your E/, this is probably what your thumbstick or D-pad's going to look like. So as you can see, the thumbstick rolled too far past down, and then I'll do the same thing on the D-pad. So you can even see there it lit up on the right, which therefore the game can interpret it maybe as fighter sword or long sword. To counteract this, you might try exaggerating the individual inputting of left down up and slowly build up to a nice speed. If rolling is something you want to continue doing, then just remember to cut the input off it down and practice until you're happy. If your E/slashes ever come out as hero sword, then you know you're not doing this correctly and you might need to reconsider. Training methods. Practice makes perfect. Consider gathering a bunch of Varswords and running around a low level area like AC/DC and practicing the E/ with relatively low danger to yourself. Risch, one of the top runners of Battle Network 3, has an interesting save state against Flamman with Varswords. Flamman's candles keep him invulnerable, so you don't kill your enemy before being able to practice 3 times or 4 times in one fluid scene. So this is similar to how Risch would set up against Flamman for a really good practice scenario, because Flamman then has his invincibility, so I don't have to worry about killing him, and then I can just keep sort of resetting to this save state. And then I'll just go back. as such. If you happen to have a game save around the later stages of the game, you could even consider doing a similar setup against the secret area alarm enemies. A good rate to aim for is 80 to 90% success rate when performing E/ for Varsword. Also, because the inputs for Sonic Boom or Tri-Slash are a lot easier, it can be a good idea to use that technique on viruses, whereas Elemental Sonic Boom is always the better choice on enemy navies because of only that last wave causing the invincibility frames. If you're completely confident in your ability to pull off E/, then the only reason you'd ever do Tri-Slash is if your window of opportunity is so tight that you won't be able to fit the longer input combo in. The earliest you can obtain Varsword is using the code 63997824 on Higsby's Lotto Number Trader after beating the Beastman scenario. The Legacy Collection release is upon us. If you haven't purchased the game already, consider using Risch's Nexus link on screen and down below to grab yourself a copy. A small portion goes to him. Good luck. I hope any of this helps you diagnose perhaps where you're going wrong and get you on the path to using this chip correctly. Thanks.